Welcome to Voices of the Valley. The first season of Whitewater Valley Presbytery's podcast explores the theme of justice. Episode 3 features the Reverend Elizabeth Kaznak-Hall, a Presbyterian minister with years of involvement in refugee resettlement, as she shares her experiences in living out biblical and practical justice in welcoming the stranger and discerning who truly are our neighbors.
Welcome, everyone, to Voices of the Valley, the official podcast of the Whitewater Valley Presbytery of the Presbyterian Church, USA. We're so grateful today that we have the Reverend Elizabeth Kaznak-Hall with us to talk about her work supporting refugee families who are building their lives in new communities and how she is living out the work of justice, which is the theme of our first season.
Yes, and I am also co-moderating here today with Bo. This is not Jenny Heimach, this is Bob Heimach, and Jenny could not be here today, so I'm glad to fill in. And I'm especially glad because I'm here with my friend Liz, who is, of course, a Presbyterian minister, and I worked with Liz when she was the interim associate pastor at Irvington Pres. We worked together for a year and a half, and so I learned a lot about Liz and especially about her work with Kentucky Refugee Ministry. And that is part of the reason that Liz helped Irvington Church initiate a refugee program at Irvington Pres. So we're looking forward to hearing about that, but also just some more of your background, Liz, if you don't mind filling us in, especially on how you got interested and involved with refugee work.
Good. I graduated from Louisville Presbyterian Seminary, so found myself in Louisville, Kentucky, and received my first call at Highland Presbyterian Church in the 1990, and right at about that time, 1989, a woman from that church, Donna Craig, was sitting in church, and they sang the hymn with this line that really spoke to her: "Let there be peace on earth, and let it begin with me." That line so resonated with her that she went on the Guatemalan mission trip that the church did that year, and was so moved by that experience. She got home and she said to the pastor, Jim Chatham at the time, "What can I do? I can't move to Guatemala. I've got 4 kids, but I got to do something." And they had this wonderful dialogue about faith grows by risk. And she knew she wanted to work with international people and do that locally. And so he connected her with the Presbyterian refugee program. But ultimately that led to a relationship with the Church World Service and then Episcopal Migration Ministries. And Kentucky Refugee Ministries was born right at the time I was starting my very first call. And part of what I was doing there was serving youth and young adults. And as most new pastors, you're trying to think what meaningful way you can serve these amazing people. And that for me was just a no-brainer to pair something of what mission we could do with the refugees that would be coming in, some of who would be helped by that church, all of who would be coming through the church. And so that's what we did. Donna first got a family from Romania. And then shortly after that, Desert Storm started, and we started receiving some Iraqi, mostly young men. And the church got this one group, I think it was of 11 men, and we had trouble finding a co-sponsor. That's other volunteer groups who will help resettle those folks. And so Highland took them all. And it was no shortage of things to do. And so we collected furniture and clothing and food. I got the youth group parents to do a big dinner for them where we heard their stories. And I think listening to them tell their stories was sort of that was the key to my heart for me, that put me on the path to working with refugees to this day.
Yeah, I love that when things just sort of make sense. It makes sense to embark on this particular path and things begin to fall into place. Of course, there's a lot of work that goes into that for things to fall into place. But through doing this work, what's going through my mind is the question about how this work has affected your thinking with regard to theology and with regard to how you think about justice. How has the work with refugees affected the way you think about God and the way you think about the call to do justice?
Well, for me, going into ministry was really not intentionally about serving a traditional church. It was about going into some kind of service, as opposed to going into church. And so when I ended up in church, I knew it would always be through a service capacity. I'm serving the church, but in any program that I was going to do, I knew early on that the way God spoke to me was hands-on, and that was getting involved in people's lives and getting other people involved in other people's lives, because if I was going to lead them, then that's what we were going to do. And so when the refugees came, I think it was just like this natural moment of this cosmic global God that now was standing among us and sharing their story of oppression and of suffering and of love and rebuilding and of family and of faith. The fact that they came from so many different faith backgrounds for me was just a breath of fresh air and a drink of cold water, because I feel like early on my understanding of God was just big, was not trapped in a church. And so, and yet the call of Christ to help those who are suffering and to welcome the stranger and to get involved, that was where I could find sort of the hands and feet to do the work. So the theology was always there in terms of, I don't think I ever believed in a God that wasn't a just God, that cared about the poor and the suffering. And then finding a way to do that through the Christian faith gave me the tools then to say, I know what to do. I can help them get food. I can help them get clothing. I can honor who they are as human beings. I can welcome the stranger. And by being present, I'll grow, and everyone who's sitting in the room and listening and being part of that will grow and be transformed. So the justice work to me it's just a natural part of everything about believing in God. Without justice, there's no real heart to your faith in practice. Yeah, they're one and the same, really,
Yeah. Thanks, Liz. Let me take you back, Liz, to 2015 when you got involved at Irvington Church as interim associate pastor. And at the time, Irvington Church was not involved with any refugee work at all. And within probably 6 months of you starting, you were ready to initiate and help us learn more about refugee work. And can you tell us about the beginnings of that work at Irvington Church?
Sure.
And kind of the nitty-gritty details about how we got started working with refugees?
Right. Well, I think it was just because I'm not going to be part of a church that's not serving refugees. So when I got to know Bob, and you could tell the heart of that church was in justice ministries. They were already doing so many awesome things in the community and in Mexico. And as soon as I moved here, got connected to Exodus Refugee and Immigration. I knew Cole Varga, and I knew the director before that, because we actually became executive directors at the same time and went to training. So I had connected with Exodus as soon as I moved here from Louisville to see how I could get involved. And then when I landed at Irvington, I was like, I don't know how to get involved. And so we had them come and speak at a Christ Cafe. And so a larger group of people could learn about what it would mean to be a co-sponsor of a family. And then we took it to session and created a group of volunteers that most of whom continue to help resettle families today. Yeah, that's how it got started.
Yeah, it's very exciting because within probably a month of session approval, Exodus called us and said a family was on the way.
A family of 7 from
Family of
Syria.
7, and we were shocked, I think.
We thought we'd had 3 months to wait, and really in Indianapolis, the door had been shut to Syrians. And we got a call as well from the Columbus First Presbyterian in Columbus that they wanted to co-sponsor, but they were outside of the 50-mile radius. And so it just seemed like what a great opportunity to welcome a family and to have 2 churches come together and support them. And little did we know that by sharing their story and getting involved, the Presbytery would start writing about it in the newsletter. And Fort Wayne got involved. And so we had support coming from various places all around the Presbytery for this one Syrian family.
Right. So we met them, I think it was the day before St. Patrick's Day or something.
March 16th.
March 16th in 2016, maybe. And they came off the airplane, and we had a group from the church meet them there, which was just amazing. I think there were tears in all of our eyes. It was funny because the family wasn't exactly sure where Indianapolis was.
They thought they were going to India. And then no, not India, Indianapolis. And they were like, well, it doesn't really matter. We're getting out of the refugee situation.
Right. So they came here, and so immediately they're faced with needs. So tell us a little bit, some of the immediate needs for any refugee family or people coming in.
Well, there's the list of material things, but I think the first thing they need is connection. They need community. They need to know that they are coming to this place where nothing is familiar and they know no one. Nothing looks, the trees are different. The landscape's different. The signs, they can't read the signs often, just shopping. How would they even begin to do that? So to have that group of people at the airport, standing there, open arms, tears in eyes, saying, we are here for you. One thing you hear often with refugees is, you are our family here. They immediately grab onto you and like a lifeline, literally. So I think the first and most important thing that you do is what is the most important thing in ministry: presence. You're there. You are there, and you share names, and then you get started with some of the hardscape, right? You got to collect things. We had already set up the apartment before they come. That's something that you do as a part of their welcome, is to collect furniture and to get donations of food and that kind of stuff to make sure that everything's in the apartment. And then you just don't leave a day open that they don't have somebody knocking on their door and visiting them. So they're welcomed at the airport. They walk into a fully furnished home, and then you're with them through orientation. You help them learn to ride the bus. You help make sure that they're signed up for English as a second language, and that all the case management coordination with Exodus is smooth and taking place.
Right. There are quite a few challenges, but of course there's joys too. Tell us a little bit about that family and why we celebrate them and our relationship with them that continues.
Right. Every family has so much to share and so much joy. I mean, they have some tragedy in their life, but this particular family were 4-generation leather crafters. And so they had a long history in Syria and a factory that went back to their grandparents. And they made everything from horse saddles to handbags. And so one of the first things that we did was get a donated sewing machine, commercial grade, right, sewing machine. And Haitham and Muhammad started making purses, leather bags. And with those bags, we were able to go into so many churches, and they would tell their story and then sell their handicraft, literally from here to Columbus to Fort Wayne, to festivals that were happening downtown Indianapolis. Those leather bags, that craft they had learned, in their home country translated here. And it spoke to people, and more than that, it helped them have they had pride in their work here. It gave them some income, but they met so many people through the church.
Yeah. And now all of them are naturalized citizens.
Yep, all of them are naturalized citizens. The 3 young adults all work in healthcare. Muhammad is a registered nurse. And the 2 young girls, Safa and Marwa, are CNAs or CMAs. And then Sarah is now in high school, and she's like a 4.0 or a 4.2 or whatever. So they're just, they're doing amazing. And they've had challenges here, but if you ask them, they'll say, we've had no challenges here because we had you.
Right. So challenges. We've worked with other families too, some of which have even greater challenges. So, I mean, is the language for you the biggest challenge?
It's huge. The language is huge because you can't navigate, even a bus. Everything is in English. And so the families that have at least one person that has a little bit of English, and in our case, Muhammad had a little tiny bit of English, and it went a long, long way. But English is definitely, and then transportation.
Yeah.
Just getting, Indianapolis is not an easy place to get around, and sometimes to find affordable housing, they're not very close to the resettlement agency. Exodus is here in Irvington on Washington Street. But affordable housing can be as far away as like Avon or where was that first place?
Pike Township.
Pike Township.
And the bus system was difficult to navigate.
Yeah, an hour to get to an English class is not an efficient use of time and energy. And so, language, transportation, job skills.
Going to the bank. Learning the financial system of the United States is difficult.
Very difficult.
Yeah.
Trust, finding who do you open the door for and who do you not open the door for. Just anybody that comes to the door is speaking to you in English. And so.
Yeah. One challenge that didn't seem to be a problem with any of the families we've helped is the differences of religion.
Right.
That's never been an issue at all.
Never an issue.
Us.
No.
Is,
as Heimach would remind us, we have the same God. They're Muslim, and they're traditional Muslim, and we have the same God, and we all believe that you should love your neighbor as God loves, and so that's what they do.
You're listening to Voices of the Valley, a podcast of Whitewater Valley Presbytery.
Yeah, it's such multifaceted and long-term investment, this work with welcoming people, helping them get acclimated to a new culture, a new community. And it seems like that would present a pretty high barrier to entry for a person or a leader in a church that wants to, get involved in refugee ministry or feels the same sort of call that you felt early on. But I'm sure you started off by saying, number one is relationships, developing relationships, friendship. And so that somewhat allows, I think, someone to imagine, well, maybe I could step into this. And so, if I were a church leader, or if a listener out there is a leader in the church and is interested and feels this pull, are there ways that you would suggest wading into the waters, so to speak?
Let me first say that God doesn't do our faith for us or walk our walk for us. We do that. And refugees will walk their walk for themselves. They will work harder than anybody that's trying to help them, because that's their job and it's their goal. Their goal is to be self-sufficient and to contribute to this wonderful opportunity that's been laid before them, and they do not take that lightly. I think a good way to get involved is to study the issue a bit. There's so many wonderful scriptures, Old and New Testament, that talk about welcoming the stranger. You two were an alien or a stranger, a sojourner in a foreign land. We are all, in a sense, connected to a family that either came here historically in our own lineage that is from another place. We know what it means to travel to new and strange places, even if that's staying in the same community. Sometimes things happen in our lives where we're faced with really life-altering changes, and we've got to navigate those waters. But Exodus has a wonderful mentoring program and a wonderful volunteer training program. And so if a church wasn't ready to co-sponsor, and you're never the sponsor, you're the co-sponsor, Exodus or Catholic Charities will do the initial paperwork, and all of the legal stuff happens through that agency. So really, you get trained as a group of volunteers if you're going to co-sponsor, and then you can walk alongside Exodus doing some of that legal work. But if you don't want to jump in that far, you can collect donations and connect with Exodus. They have drop-off days on Fridays. You guys, you can do, so we had a church that was in Greene County, Kentucky that I served still to this day on and off, Ebenezer Presbyterian Church. I want to shout out their name. And they welcomed 2 refugee families, and they were an hour and a half outside of Louisville in a rural community. And we helped 2 families from Burma, and they did a kitchen shower, and they collected kitchen items. They made a donation of financial support to Kentucky Refugee Ministries in order to help families who needed a little extra assistance. And so there's a lot of ways to get involved hands-on and to get your church involved through collecting things, learning about refugees, and talking to Exodus and seeing what they need and how you can be helpful.
Yeah, it's so interesting that you started with that education piece. My children came home today and said that they had learned a new word. And so I thought, okay, what's the new word you learned? And they said it was in our geography lesson. We learned the word immigrant. And so I asked if they could tell me a little bit about what they learned, and people that choose or have chosen to come to the country to immigrate. And I said, that's really interesting, because today I'm going to be talking with someone who has done refugee ministry. And one of my children said, and they're 8, so they said, what's the difference between an immigrant and a refugee, or is there a difference? And I didn't quite know how to articulate that difference, and I thought maybe Liz could shed some light on it. So yeah.
There's actually a legal definition of refugee, and I don't have it right before me, but it basically means that you forcibly have to leave your home country because of fear of persecution based on race, religion, politics, and I think they've added environmental concerns. You should cross the border into a second country, but in that second country, you are not allowed to have asylum or resettlement as a citizen. And so you have to then be resettled in yet a third option, a third country. And so the United Nations High Commission on Refugees is sort of our global partner in this effort to interview folks who, by the masses, often find themselves in a third country, in a refugee camp or a holding situation, because they can't go back home and they cannot have permanent residency where they're at. An immigrant can choose to immigrate, cross borders to, and it may be difficult, but they don't have one that UNHCR refugee status, so they don't have that visa, that marker, which is very important. And the reasons for them leaving their home country can vary. Whereas for a refugee, it's that you have forcibly had to go because your life was not going to be able to exist in that situation in your home country.
Thank you. That's really helpful.
Recently, a friend and I met with some of the leaders at Exodus, and one of the questions we asked them were, where are the refugees coming to Indiana from? Because people may not know that. They told us that right now, about 50% of the refugees that come in Indiana actually come from Congo. And then 35% come from Burma. In fact, they told us that the Burmese population in Indianapolis is the second largest in the world, because we've received so many Burmese refugees. And I know some have moved to Fort Wayne also. So they're coming from those countries, but also the countries that you hear about in the news more, maybe Syria or Afghanistan, Sudan, Ukraine,
Afghanistan uses.
and so these refugees are coming, and they're actually coming by the thousands. They told us that within even the state of Indiana, they expect in 2024 that to have over 5,000 refugees come through Indiana. So there are many, many refugees coming in. So Liz, one of the questions I want to ask you right now, with so many refugees coming in, where someone who wants to be involved with refugee work, where is their hope? Or is it almost seems like it's too much. So what do we do about that? Emotionally, spiritually, where's our hope?
Well, the hope is always there, right? I mean, we live into hope, captives free, and we get involved. If you can help one family, then you help one family. If you can get involved and help a number of families, you can do that. There's lots of nonprofits that leverage, some aid to refugees. Of the millions of refugees, now what did we read? It was over 104 million in the world. Less than 1% are resettled anywhere ever. And so those numbers seem big, like 5,000, but it's still such a small percentage. The United States Refugee Program is still a very small number of the population that makes up the immigrant population that comes into the United States every year. And so whether you're helping an immigration program or a refugee program, I think it's, being a presence somewhere in one of the organizational nonprofit systems or personally in somebody's life, to help them figure out where the resources are and point them in some good directions. And sometimes it's just a little, like they always talk about that hand up, honestly, sometimes it's just that small of a difference, that you show them one time what they need to do, and they're off and running and doing it. So it's not like it takes your whole life. It may take more time up front when they're first getting here and they don't have much knowledge about the place or any at all. And then, and Exodus says 4 to 6 months, you should kind of back off and not be a co-sponsor. Our volunteer group has kind of failed at that because we fall in love with our friends. And refugees are just humans with a label. They're people, and they're our community, and they're our friends, and they have so much to give to create the fabric of who we are as a community. So partly getting to know them is just opening your own world and expanding who you get to meet as neighbor. And that's pretty awesome.
It is. Yeah, I would agree with you totally that the rewards of getting to know a family or people from a different country, even if the language is different, the reward is so great that I would encourage anyone to get involved. You don't have to have special skills to do that. But I also want to give you some points for quoting a hymn earlier on. Live in the hope of captives free. Come along. That's great.
I quoted 2 hymns here today. I will quote Zalola, who's originally from Sudan, and about the wars in Sudan. And then she and her husband were in Egypt waiting many, many years before they had a chance to resettle. And when we sat in her living room through an interpreter, she thanked us and claimed us as family. And she said, When I saw you come into the room, light came into my life.
Wow. Wow. When I saw you come into the room, light came into my life. You've really drawn attention to the hope and the joy that's involved in building relationships with people who, through no fault of their own, and who have been forced out of their home country. And I'm just so thankful that you've taken this time to talk with us. And it was so fortuitous that Bob was able to be here as well, and to have this background of doing this type of work as well. So I wondered if you'd be willing to round out our time today by offering a blessing or a word of encouragement.
Absolutely. A charge and a blessing for all of us. May our hearts all be touched by the reality of what's happening in our world. May God always challenge our assumptions. May our lives be transformed as they always are, as we welcome our neighbor, our stranger, our friend. May the radical transforming call of justice, for who Jesus calls the least of these, bless us daily. Amen.
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 Yeah. Liz, thank you very much for being part of this podcast. And Bo, thank you for letting me nudge in here and enjoy this conversation with you too. It's been a pleasure. And I do want to encourage people to continue to listen to Voices of the Valley. The next interview is with Reverend Jim Riley and his wife, Debbie, because they are involved with Circle City Dinner Church at Westminster Neighborhood Services. And that will be put on the podcast's link, or however you all call that, in a couple of weeks, I believe. So thank you for listening, everyone. Hope to see you soon.
Thank you for listening to Voices of the Valley, and to our guest, Reverend Elizabeth Kaznak-Hall, for sharing her knowledge of and passion in welcoming refugee families and helping us to a better understanding of who truly are our neighbors. We hope you'll join us for our next episode featuring Reverend Jim and Debbie Riley, founders of the Circle City Dinner Church on the near east side of Indianapolis. It is a ministry of justice with the mission to care for both the spiritual and physical needs of those who struggle with the issues of poverty and life in the inner city. For our host, Reverend Bo Brown, special guest host, Reverend Bob Heimach, and Presbytery support staff Dawn West, this is Craig Shaw reminding you to let your voice be heard.